different perspectives, and an all-inclusive approach to moving Nevis forward. Tune in. It's time for us to speak up.
Good evening and welcome to Speak Up, a weekly radio program that seeks to provide social commentary on matters of interest to Nevisions resident in Nevis and abroad. Now the show is hosted by yours truly. Jaedee Caines and Mr. Rohan Isles, who actually couldn't be here with us this evening. And so Rohan, I hope that you will be able to join me next week, Thursday, when we return for another edition of Speak Up. So yes, Speak Up is this and every Thursday right here on the Eastern Caribbean's Powerhouse. You can tune in via 860 AM or 93.7 FM. You can also tune in via Von Radio's Facebook page as well as Von Radio's YouTube page. And so we are seeking to keep you informed, and so we've opened up as many channels as possible. Rohan, I'm pretty sure that those persons who tune in every week to hear you will definitely miss you this week, but I'll hope to do justice to the show. I want to say special greetings to everyone who would have tuned in. Some of you have been tuning in religiously week after week. I think this is our third episode. I'm not certain, but I think it's our third episode. And we thank you so much for that. If this is your first time tuning in, however, we do not want it to be your last. And so I encourage you to tune in this and every Thursday night. All right. Before we get into some of the topics that I will be discussing this evening, I just want to offer condolences to all who mourn at this time, and I'm hoping that you can find comfort in fond memories. I particularly want to mention the family of the late Pandora Coverley, who is a former educator. Most persons know her as Miss Coverley. Miss Coverley would have taught for many years at the Charlestown Secondary School. I'm not sure if she taught at any other institutions, but I know for certain that she taught at the Charlestown Secondary School because I attended the Charlestown Secondary School and she was a teacher there. And you know, just recently I would have visited Miss Coverley probably a few months back. It wasn't that long, just a few months ago. I would have visited her because I knew she was ill. And it's so funny because, you know, we joke, it was myself and a few colleagues, and we joked that, you know, physically she wasn't as well as we would have wanted her to be. She wasn't as well as we remember her to be, but definitely when it came to that mouth, Miss Coverley was right on target. Miss Coverley had not changed at all. Maybe everything else was ill, but definitely not her vocal ability. So I know that she will be missed. She also would have shared very fun memories. She told me about a time that she would have passed by my class and she heard some students talking, my voice being the loudest naturally. My voice being the loudest naturally. She would have heard some students talking and she singled me out because, you know, she heard me quite loudly and I said something that I wasn't supposed to say. And so she gave me lines to write. She gave me lines to write, and she said from that moment she and I were best of friends. And then she remembered one time several years later when I became a parent, she saw me on the boat and my daughter, as small as she is, was talking the entire trip. And I just happened to glance over at Miss Coverley, and Miss Coverley said, "What you expect? That is what you used to do." So, you know, it was really a good opportunity catching up with Miss Coverley and sharing, you know, fun memories. So she'll definitely be missed, and I just want to offer my deepest and sincerest condolences to her entire family. I also want to extend deepest condolences to the family of Ronice Williams. Ronice is a young lady, was a young lady, very well known here on the island of Nevis. Brilliant young lady at that. And so I know that she too will be deeply missed. And I thought it necessary to mention young Ronice's passing, particularly because In 2012, Ronise was a contestant in the Miss Culture Queen pageant. And as a contestant in the Miss Culture Queen pageant back then, she would have definitely been in contact with me, because I was the chairperson of the show that time, the senior pageants committee, and so I would have liaised on many occasions with Ronise. Immediately we recognized her for her brilliance. Quite a good speaker. She was a people person as well. Appeared serious, but she enjoyed a good joke, and so she too will be missed. And so I am just extending my deepest condolences to her entire family, her friends and well-wishers, loved ones, everyone. I hope that you find comfort in fond memories. So those are my condolences for this evening. I must admit that it has put me in somewhat of a somber mood, just reflecting on the fact that we would have lost these two very dear persons. Nonetheless, I'm here for another episode and I have to speak up. Naturally, I want to start off with COVID-19. This is something that you'll probably be hearing about for many weeks, even to some small extent, because that is the situation that we are facing. COVID-19 doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. It is the situation we are living in. It is the era that we are living in, and so we have to find ways of dealing with it, have to find ways of living with it. I can tell you that the numbers continue to rise here in St. Kitts and Nevis. As of yesterday, Wednesday, September 8th, very late last night, 11:15 p.m., we learned that there were, let me just refer to my notes here. Yes, there were 1,352 total cases in St. Kitts and Nevis. 1,352 total cases for St. Kitts and Nevis as at yesterday. Of that amount, 598 were active cases. In total, St. Kitts has seen 1,119 cases. Nevis has seen 233 cases. And there have been 5 deaths reported as at yesterday, Wednesday, 8th September. Now, specifically as it relates to the island of Nevis, as at yesterday, Wednesday, 8th September, we had 156 active cases. Active cases. And so the 233 that I mentioned earlier for Nevis, of that amount, 156 is the total. And let me pause here for a second, because some persons have been asking me if the dashboard that they see being issued for the island of Nevis, the numbers, if that is in addition to what we see on the federal dashboard. No, it is not. It is just a further breakdown of the Nevis statistics. Okay, you would realize that in the federal dashboard, the one that has the lots of colors, the information has St. Kitts and Nevis, but only in terms of the total number of cases per island to date. There is no mention of the active cases per island. The active cases that are mentioned there would be collective. And so for the Nevis dashboard that recently started being issued, those numbers speak only to the island of Nevis. So I hope I was able to provide some clarity, because I know quite a few persons had been asking. Okay, so yes, we have 156 active cases on the island of Nevis. 8 were new as at yesterday. So over a 24 period, we had 8 new cases. Great news though, we've had 77 recoveries. So even though we have 156 active, we've had 77 recoveries as at last night. And so those are the statistics as it relates to the island of Nevis. We also know that some persons had been hospitalized here on the island of Nevis. Like I told you, that we are on Facebook as well as YouTube, as well as mainstream media, which is the radio. And so I am noticing here that someone is asking how many persons are vaccinated. I don't have that data with me. However, I I don't speak for the Ministry of Health either. I just think that as someone who is involved in community work, someone who considers themselves very much a part of the Nivision community, and someone who aspires to be at an even higher level in terms of my service to the community, that it's important, it's necessary for me to do whatever little I can to help educate our people, whether it has to do with COVID-19 or something else that's of national interest. And so, having shared those COVID-19 statistics, I think it is important now for me to just remind all of our people, everyone under the sound of my voice, to follow the protocols. I need each of us to follow the protocols. You're only seeing me this evening, hence the reason why I'm not wearing my mask, even though when Rohan is here, we are quite a distance apart, because here at Von Radio they really do all they can to ensure that we follow the protocols. And so that is why you're not seeing me in a mask this evening. For those who are viewing, that's because I'm the only one here. If you've just tuned in, I mentioned earlier that Rohan is unable to join me this evening, but we hope to have him back next week. And so remember to wash or sanitize your hands. You know, I find that a lot of us are getting so caught up with the ability to sanitize our hands that we are not even bothering to wash our hands. Listen, the sanitization cannot beat good old soap and water. And so as long as you're able to use soap and water, please do wash your hands thoroughly. And if that ability is not there, make sure that you sanitize frequently touched surfaces, inclusive of your actual hands. I remind you as well to wear face masks. I mean, this has been going on for some time, and we still have people walking around without face masks. Now, I'm not talking about when you're walking by yourself and you just need to pull it down to catch your breath. I'm talking about persons in business places not wearing their face masks. I mean, come on. We all have a responsibility in this thing, in this fight against COVID-19. And so please, I am spending some time on this topic because I need our people to follow the protocols. Far too many of us are being infected with this virus. Yes, we've had a lot of recoveries, but we've also had some deaths, and one death is one too many. And so I am pleading all of us to follow the protocols. I also ask that we remember to observe physical distancing. We are asking that if you have to be in a space with someone else or other persons, that you maintain a few feet distance from them. That cannot be that hard. And so please, I am begging of you to follow the protocols. Those are the non-pharmaceutical measures that have been put in place. Now, there's also vaccination. Vaccination is available here on the island of Nevis as well as on the island of St. Kitts, so in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I am told now that it's also available to children 12 years and older. 12 years and older are now eligible for the vaccine. And so if it is your desire, if it is your will, remember that vaccination is available and you can go right ahead if that is your desire. I remind you though to make sure that you liaise with your doctors. We all have a personal responsibility, and I would think that your personal responsibility would be to liaise with your doctors to find out your status, your eligibility to become vaccinated. And if that is your desire, go right ahead. We all have to do our part to help to fight this virus known as COVID-19. Now, even though we are operating in a COVID-19 environment, we have quite a bit of things happening, and it seems to me that there's a disconnect in terms of what's happening to some extent on the island of St. Kitts and what is happening on the island of Nevis. We know that over on St. Kitts right now we have the Caribbean Premier League. It's quite exciting, I might add. The quite exciting Caribbean Premier League happening on the island of St. Kitts. And, quite a few divisions have gone over. I mean, definitely it's not like before because it's only open to vaccinated patrons. And even some persons who are vaccinated have opted not to go. I mean, that's an expected because this is the times that we are living in. It doesn't take away from the fact that it is quite exciting. But I saw the need to mention that because we have cricket played louder, the biggest party in sports, the Caribbean Premier League, happening on the island of St. Kitts, and I'm not seeing anything similar happening on the island of Nevis. And that is not to criticize one or praise the other. It's just to say that there seems to be a disconnect in terms of what's happening on one island versus what is happening on the other. I thought that the regulations speak collectively to us as a federation, so I find that to be interesting. Equally interesting, I would have listened to the news this morning, and I'm a pageant girl, and so naturally I was keen to hear that Sugar Mass National Carnival Committee is making plans to have its events this year, and among them we have pageants. We have definitely the National Carnival Queen pageant, and meanwhile on the island of Nevis we have not seen any such pageants this year for Culturama, which by the way would have been pushed back to September. So I just find that there is somewhat of a disconnect in terms of what is happening on both islands, and I would have thought that there would be a little bit more camaraderie, a little bit more synergy, considering that it's a federal government, and in this case it is one that is comprised of members of both islands forming that federal government. So food for thought. Remember, it's Speak Up, and so we are speaking up on any and everything that we deem important to us here on the island of Nevis. In a similar vein, allow me to mention that the reopening of public schools on Nevis has been delayed in the physical sense by at least 1 week. I know that the some of the private schools would have returned. However, here on Nevis, the public schools would have been delayed in terms of their physical reopening by at least 1 week. I actually just left a virtual PTA meeting, and I was told that next week we will have school. However, at least at my school, which is the Charleston Primary School, it would be a staggered reopening, and so I guess we will hear much more from the other schools and the Minister of Education as it relates to that. Meanwhile, on the island of St. Kitts, schools have opened. Some schools opened on Monday on St. Kitts, but the majority would have opened on Wednesday, which was yesterday on the island of St. Kitts. I am asking parents, all of us as parents, to have a word with our children about the reopening of school. I know they are children will be children, but in this moment we have to have a little chat with them and remind them about following the protocols and the need to be physically distant, at least for this time. And so remember, it's not just for the teachers to do. We as parents have a role to play as well. Now, last week when I was here, and Rohan was here as well, we would have touched on a topic that I didn't get an opportunity to speak on at length the way I would have wanted to. I did start on it, but there were certain aspects that I wanted to highlight. And if you were here last week, you would recall that one of the things that I touched on was the division or the divisive nature that we operate, or we are seeming to operate, on the island of Nevis. I don't know if it's deliberate by the majority of us, but it seems to be deliberate by at least some, where we continue to pit people against each other. Everything seems to be black versus white, no gray area here on the island of Nevis. And I remind you that our population is quite small, and so we are in no position to operate with this level of divisiveness. Okay, and just to recap, I would have mentioned some of the elements of which we would have pushed this division, and I said we push it along party lines, where we figure that persons are either of one party or the next, and so if you seem to be affiliated, or it is perceived that you're affiliated with a particular party, political party that is, then certain privileges, certain rights that you have as a citizen are not afforded to you as afforded to others, seemingly. And so that is something that cannot, ought not, should not happen on the island of Nevis, in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We are far too small, and it really goes against our fundamental rights as human beings to support whichever party we so desire. And I always use the opportunity to tell people, even people who are affiliated with my own party, which by the way is the Nevis Reformation Party, I always use the opportunity to remind that there's nothing that says that I am obligated to give Mary or Jane my support. As a citizen of this great country of St. Kitts and Nevis, it is my right to look at both sides, or all three sides, or all four sides, how many sides we have, and make an informed decision about what I think, best represents my views, about what I think will help to move my country forward, and in the case of the Nevis elections, will move my island forward. And I want many of us to adopt that attitude, where you listen to both sides and you do not allow the political lingo, the political language to cause you not to speak to your neighbor, cause you not to speak to your family. I mean, boyfriends and girlfriends have broken up in the name of politics. Husbands and wives have broken up in the name of politics. Best friends have stopped speaking in the name of politics. And that cannot happen, not in a country of this size. There's also the very popular one. It seems to raise its head more often when it comes to an election period, where we push this agenda of locals versus non-nationals. You're either from Nevis or you're not. And in true sense, yes, you're either from Nevis or you're not from Nevis, or you're either from St. Kitts and Nevis or you're not from St. Kitts and Nevis. But that has nothing to do with your ability to function in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. But some, for political mileage, and I'll call it what it is, tend to push that agenda. And so even in pushing that agenda, or whilst pushing that agenda, we make people feel that if they were to show their support in a particular way, that they will be discriminated against. And I find that to be such a lie, such an untruth, because I mean, here on the island of Nevis, we have a situation where even people who were born here on the island of Nevis, because they support a particular political party, they aren't able to benefit from certain things. Yet we push to persons who are not physically born here on the island of Nevis that one party will not support you because of your nationality. I think it's preposterous. But I just want to mention these few things that I didn't get an opportunity to mention last week, and that is, well, they are rather, that it was the Nevis Reformation Party, which is now in opposition, hoping to be in government following the next elections, that would have reduced for skilled persons the cost of the work permit from $2,500 to $1,500 annually. And I mentioned the Nevis Reformation Party because most often when we speak about this divisiveness and which party is for you, which party is for non-nationals, and which party isn't, the untruth that is being told is that the NRP is the one that is against persons who are not from the island of Nevis. And so I thought it necessary to mention here that it was the NRP that would have reduced work permits for unskilled workers from $1,600 to $1,000 annually, and the NRP would have reduced for skilled workers from $2,500 to $1,500 annually. The same party that it's been said does not care about all of its people. And it's important that I mention all of its people, because really and truly there shouldn't be any division as long as you make Nevis your home and you are doing what you are supposed to do, what you're required to do under our law, and that is regularizing your status. I understand and can appreciate that there are persons from Nevis, myself included, who would have had to go overseas, whether it be for education or just to live for a short period of time, and we would have had to rely on whatever is in place in terms of laws of the land. And so, I think it is important that we adopt an all-inclusive approach. Notwithstanding, I will say though that Nevisians have an opportunity, Nevisians have a right to eat in the country of their birth, the land of their birth. It is crazy that you are from the island of Nevis and you can't eat on the island of your birth. But I'll continue. And even for persons who would have made Nevis their home and they can't eat where they live, it is absolutely crazy. All right, I will continue. It was also the NRP that would have put in place that if you have 3 successive work permits, you could apply for residential status. The NRP did that. Also, the NRP saw to that happen because the NRP wanted to bridge the gap between the work permit and the 14 years needed to become a citizen. So before, it was just that you get a work permit and or you become a citizen, which is 14 years later. There was no in between. And so the NRP came up with this concept where you can have 3 successive work permits. You can apply for residential status thereafter. Not being a citizen, that is still 14 years, but at least residential status. Additionally, at the health facility, at the hospital, there was a time when locals paid less than the non-national community. And so if the locals, the Nevisians, paid $40, the non-national community was paying $80. It was the NRP that changed that and said one price across the board. The NRP did that. And so as I wind down, I think it is important for me to stress that this behavior of creating division amongst our people is coming from the top. Yes, we have some persons who we work with across from us who are pushing this agenda, and they too need to be stopped. But the reality is, when we have public officials who push this, people who you look up to who push this, it will only trickle down to the ordinary man. And I think that as politicians, as public figures, it is important for us to be careful with our messages. It is important for us to remember that there are people who are looking up to us. And so without any hesitancy, any reluctance, without any fear, I want to reiterate that there is a culture of division that is being pushed on the island of Nevis, and it needs to stop. And I am calling on all, whether you are a cleaner, whether you are a lawyer, whether you are a politician, you can even be the premier. Whoever you are, I am calling on you. You could be Jaedee Caines. I am calling on you to stop your division on the island of Nevis. Ladies and gentlemen, I was a bit lonely this evening because I didn't have the company of Mr. Rohan Isles, but I am sure, I am hoping rather, that I can be joined by him next week when we'll have an even better episode of Speak Up. But naturally, I want to thank you so much for giving me your time over the past half hour, 30 minutes, and invite you now to tune in next week again when we'll have a brand new edition of Speak Up. Remember, we are on 860 AM, 93.7 FM, Vaughan Radio on Facebook, and Vaughan Radio on YouTube. I am Jaedee Caines, and this has been Speak Up. Thank you and good night.
Join Jaedee Caines and Rohan Isles this and every Thursday on the Caribbean's powerhouse, Vaughan Radio, for Speak Up, a social commentary talk show that addresses the state of affairs on Nevis. Expect great conversations, different perspectives, and an all-inclusive approach to moving Nevis forward. Tune in. It's time for us to speak up.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or